You've met them before. Not the loud ones, not the cruel or the careless. No, this is different. They're calm, polished. They smile when they speak. They say all the right things. But something in you recoils. It's subtle. A flicker in their eyes, a strange charge in the air, like your nervous system knows something your mind hasn't named yet. Carl Jung spent decades studying the psyche, and he discovered a danger far more insidious than malice: the person who cannot see themselves. Not metaphorically, literally blind to the parts of their psyche they've disowned. And in that blindness, they don't just deceive themselves. They begin to use you as a mirror for what they can't face. They're not trying to hurt you, but they will. Because when someone loses sight of who they really are, they become capable of anything and convinced they're doing good while doing it. That's what makes it so dangerous. It doesn't look like danger, it doesn't feel like a threat. It feels familiar, often warm at first. The surface is smooth, but what's buried beneath it is unstable, and eventually it leaks out through accusations, strange hostility, manipulation, or idealization that suddenly flips into disgust. By the time you realize what's happening, you're already inside their narrative. This is not about diagnosing others. It's about learning to recognize the moment your instincts whisper, "Something's wrong here." Stay alert. It starts with something you can't name, not a word, not a thought. Just a feeling, like a small drop of cold water sliding down your spine. The person in front of you is pleasant, maybe even kind. They're saying all the right things, but something in you stays braced. You keep listening, but part of you isn't listening at all. It's watching, tracking, quietly tense. This is the signal, your psyche's first whisper that something doesn't match. Not because they're lying exactly, but because the surface isn't connected to anything deeper. What you're hearing feels disembodied, performed, too clean. And here's where it gets dangerous. You don't want to believe it. You tell yourself to relax. You remind yourself they've been generous, insightful, maybe even vulnerable. You override the unease, because what kind of person questions someone who seems so composed, so reflective, so good? But that flicker of discomfort isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Your nervous system picks up what your mind hasn't caught, the gap between the person's image and something unspoken underneath. Their affect is controlled, but their presence feels off. Their warmth is consistent, but oddly uniform, like a mask that's been worn too long and fits too well. You've likely felt this before and ignored it. Most people do, especially if you're the type who gives others the benefit of the doubt, who listens for pain beneath anger or tries to be fair. But that's often how people get caught. Not by hostility, but by coherence, by the seamless performance of someone who has crafted a self without ever confronting it. Jung knew that the unconscious doesn't just live in dreams or slips of the tongue. It lives in tone, posture, timing, the invisible layers of expression that say more than the words ever could. And when those layers are misaligned, when the body and the face and the energy don't match, you feel it. That's the moment to pay attention. Not to accuse, not to label, but to listen deeply to what your body already knows. Something here is not what it seems. You want to believe that self-deception is obvious, that the people most disconnected from themselves walk around angry, bitter, visibly broken. But Jung discovered something far more unsettling. Often, the most psychologically divided people seem the most put together. It's not a performance in the usual sense. It's not calculated, it's protected. The persona they show the world isn't hiding a villain, it's hiding a fracture, a split between who they think they are and what they've buried so deeply they can no longer feel it. And here's the terrifying part. They're not lying. They really believe they're compassionate. They believe they're fair. They believe they see you clearly, but they don't. They're responding not to you, but to the parts of themselves they can't admit exist. And those parts need somewhere to go, so they land on you. You become the container for their shadow. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The person projecting doesn't know they're doing it. They think they're perceiving. They feel justified. And that conviction makes it nearly impossible to reach them with logic, evidence, or compassion. They don't just externalize blame. They externalize identity. You might feel like they see you more clearly than anyone at first, but over time something shifts. You realize the traits they assign to you are oddly consistent, oddly distorted, and oddly disconnected from your actual behavior. You're being watched through a lens you didn't choose. Jung saw this again and again in clinical practice. The danger wasn't hatred. It was unconsciousness paired with certainty, that lethal combination of blindness and belief. Because when someone doesn't know what they're doing and believes they're doing good, there are no breaks. And if you confront them, you won't be met with reflection. You'll be met with confusion, or moral superiority, or rage. Because to question their perception isn't just to disagree, it's to threaten the entire structure that keeps their inner world from falling apart. And so they double down, and you disappear inside the story they've built to keep themselves from seeing who they really are. You can feel it before you understand it. The way they speak, measured, clear, unwavering. Their eyes don't scan for nuance. Their voice doesn't bend with uncertainty. What they believe completely. And that might seem admirable at first. But then comes the moment they're challenged. You offer another perspective, maybe gently, maybe with care. And suddenly, the air shifts. The openness disappears. Their warmth becomes cold, their certainty sharp. You haven't just disagreed with them, you've committed a kind of trespass. This is when you realize you're not speaking to a person anymore. You're speaking to an identity. Jung called this psychic inflation, when the ego fuses with something larger than itself, an ideal, an archetype, a moral position. The healer, the victim, the truth teller, the spiritual one. It doesn't matter which mask they wear. What matters is that they've stopped seeing it as a mask. They don't say, "I believe." They say, "This is." And if you disagree, you're not just wrong, you're blind, or dangerous, or part of the problem. Because in their mind, they're not speaking from personal opinion. They're speaking as a channel for something higher. And anything that threatens that narrative must be dismissed, corrected, or destroyed. This isn't arrogance, it's dissociation disguised as conviction. You'll notice how the conversation narrows, how subtle tones of judgment creep in, how curiosity vanishes. The world becomes black and white. People are either allies or obstacles. Praise feels warm and inclusive. Critique feels like betrayal. But the most disorienting part? They still believe they're being fair. That's what makes it so difficult to confront. You're not arguing with ego in the traditional sense. You're arguing with someone who believes they've transcended ego entirely. Someone who thinks they've done the work, that they see clearly, that they've arrived. And that illusion of having nothing left to question is where the real danger lives. Because when someone is convinced they are only ever acting out of goodness, they become immune to accountability. And when they hurt you, they'll frame it as your growth, your lesson, your resistance to truth. And if you're not careful, you'll start to believe them. It doesn't happen all at once. At first, you feel seen, maybe even chosen. They pick up on small things about you. They reflect qualities back to you that you've always hoped someone would notice. There's a strange intensity to their attention, like you're under a spotlight, like you matter more here than you usually do. But then it shifts. What they reflect back starts to feel unfamiliar. They're still talking about you, but you don't recognize yourself in the description. You're told you're distant or reactive or withholding. You're told you're just like everyone else. You're told you don't care enough. And you start to wonder if maybe they're right. This is what it feels like when someone projects their shadow onto you. You stop being a person and become a surface, a screen onto which they cast the parts of themselves they can't hold. If they're disconnected from their own anger, they'll sense rage in your calm. If they've disowned their manipulative streak, they'll find subtle control in your boundaries. If they've buried their neediness, they'll call your presence overwhelming. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how clearly you explain. The more you try to clarify your intentions, the more entangled you become in theirs. Because the conversation isn't really about you. It never was. It's about what they refuse to feel in themselves. And the longer you stay, the more distorted your own reflection becomes. You'll start to doubt your memory. You'll edit your behavior before you speak. You'll walk away from interactions feeling like you did something wrong, but you can't quite name what. That's because you've been cast in a play you didn't audition for. This is the emotional violence of unconscious projection. Not loud, not explosive, but eroding. A slow dismantling of your inner clarity. A war of realities where only one side is allowed to define the terms. And here's the twist. They're convinced they're helping you. They'll say they're giving feedback, offering insight, being honest, but what they're actually doing is outsourcing their disowned traits, then holding you responsible for carrying them. You feel this as a kind of psychic exhaustion, a weight that doesn't belong to you, but keeps ending up in your hands. The more empathic you are, the more likely you are to try and carry it, to make sense of their confusion, to take responsibility for their projections. But you can't heal what isn't yours to hold. You are not their missing piece. You are not their enemy. You are not their proof that they've grown. You're just a mirror until you refuse to be. Long before your mind can explain what's happening, your body already knows. It knows in the tension in your jaw, in the subtle way your shoulders rise when you're around them, in the breath you unconsciously hold when they enter the room. It knows in the way you scan yourself for flaws, trying to stay one step ahead of their next accusation or disappointment. This is your nervous system speaking. Your mind may still be trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. You're looking for logic, fairness, a reason to stay engaged. But your body has no interest in narratives. It responds only to energy, coherence or contradiction, congruence or fracture. And when someone's outer presentation doesn't match the emotional truth underneath, your body flinches. It's not anxiety, it's intelligence. Jung understood that the psyche has multiple layers of perception. The conscious mind analyzes, defends, interprets, but the unconscious speaks through instinct, image, and sensation. And when your body reacts without your permission, you are getting information your rational mind hasn't caught up to yet. You might brush it off at first, tell yourself you're being sensitive, that you're projecting, that you owe them more patience. And maybe you do. But if your body keeps sounding the alarm, quietly, steadily, insistently, you need to listen. Because your body remembers what your mind forgets. It remembers every time you overrode your intuition in the past. It remembers what it felt like to be drawn in by charm and hurt by confusion. It knows the patterns even when you don't have language for them. This is not paranoia. This is pattern recognition encoded in flesh. The people who distort your reality rarely start with threats. They start with dissonance, something just slightly off. A microsecond of misalignment, a tone that doesn't fit the words, a glance that contradicts the smile. Your mirror neurons catch it, your gut digests it. But if your mind won't hear it, the body will keep speaking louder. And if you keep ignoring it, your body will start to carry the weight itself, in fatigue, in tension, in illness. That's the cost of internalizing what someone else refuses to hold. So the next time your body recoils, even slightly. Don't rush to fix it. Don't drown it in analysis. Pause. Pay attention. There's a difference between being uncomfortable because you're growing and being uncomfortable because something in you knows you're in danger. Learn to tell the difference, because your body already has. It's easy to watch all of this unfold in someone else, to see the projection, the inflation, the performance, to spot the mask from across the room. But the moment that really matters, the moment that separates self-awareness from self-righteousness, is the one where you turn the question around. What happens when you're the one who can't see? It's uncomfortable, maybe even threatening. But if you've been human for more than a few years, you've projected, you've been blind, you've mistaken someone else's silence for judgment, or their boundary for rejection. You've cast your hurt onto another person and walked away feeling confirmed. You've made someone your mirror, and if you're honest, you probably didn't realize it until later, if at all. Jung didn't believe in perfection. He didn't believe you could ever fully eliminate the unconscious, but he believed you could build a relationship with it, that you could create just enough inner space to notice when the projection begins and choose, slowly, humbly, not to let it define the story. So ask yourself, when do you feel the strongest certainty about someone else's motives? What kind of people tend to provoke you instantly? Where do you find yourself repeating the same emotional script, even with different people? These are your signals, not that something is wrong with them, but that something unresolved in you is being touched. And the moment you can hold that possibility, not as shame, but as inquiry, you begin to interrupt the cycle. But let's be clear, this is not about blaming yourself. It's about recognizing your capacity to distort others when you haven't faced something in yourself. And it's about breaking the spell before it takes someone else down with you. Maybe there's someone you idealized until they failed to meet an invisible expectation you never expressed. Maybe there's someone you criticized, not because they were cruel, but because they reminded you of a part of yourself you haven't learned to hold with compassion. Maybe you've hurt someone with the best of intentions. We all do this. We all carry a shadow. The difference is whether we pretend we don't. The truly dangerous person isn't the one who makes mistakes. It's the one who can't admit them, who never questions their instincts, who believes they've already done the work and now see everything clearly. That kind of self-certainty becomes a fortress, and every person who enters gets turned into something they're not, just to protect the illusion. So ask the question not once, but often. Where am I refusing to look? Whose face am I using as a canvas for my own pain? The answer won't come immediately, and that's the point. Self-awareness isn't a destination. It's a practice, a slow, courageous willingness to sit in the mess of being human and tell the truth about what you find there. Because until you do, your shadow will write the story for you, and someone else will end up paying the price. You were never meant to be perfect. That was never the goal. But at some point, maybe early, maybe recently, you learned that being good was the only safe way to exist. So you tried. You tried to be kind, thoughtful, forgiving. You tried to earn love through consistency. You tried to stay calm, even when you weren't. You tried to be harmless. But harmlessness is not the same as wholeness. And the pursuit of innocence, of always being right or nice or pure, often becomes the very thing that cuts you off from the truth of who you are. Jung said, "I would rather be whole than good." Because to be whole means to be honest, not polished, not perfect, but true. It means recognizing your capacity for cruelty, for envy, for arrogance, and choosing not to act from those places, not because they aren't there, but because you've taken the time to know them. Shadow integration isn't about fixing yourself. It's about welcoming every part of you back into awareness. It's standing in front of the mirror without flinching. It's telling the truth about what you've denied, and beginning, for the first time, to live from something deeper than performance. You'll know someone has begun this work not by how kind they seem, but by how much contradiction they can hold. They don't need to defend their goodness. They don't collapse under criticism. They don't spin discomfort into virtue. They can say, "I missed that," or "I was projecting," or even, "I don't know why I said that." Not because they lack strength, but because they've stopped trying to be above their own humanity. They make room for complexity, for nuance, for repair. And that's what makes them safe, not their image, but their integration, not their promises, but their presence. There's a humility that comes when you've looked at your own shadow long enough to recognize it in others without flinching. When you can witness someone's chaos and not immediately need to fix it or punish it because you know what it's like to carry your own. This is what makes a person trustworthy, not their light, but their relationship to their darkness. And that's the paradox. The more honest you are about your capacity to harm, the less likely you are to do it. Because you're no longer acting out of blindness. You've claimed the story. You've held the mirror. You've made the unconscious conscious. That's not perfection. That's integrity. And it's the only thing that can keep you from becoming the very danger you're trying to avoid. Stay alert, not to catch others in their darkness, but to notice your own. Not to become suspicious, but sensitive. Not to build walls, but discernment. Because the greatest danger is rarely what others hide from you. It's what they hide from themselves. And if you're not careful, it becomes what you hide too. Wholeness begins with listening, first to your body, then to your shadow, then to the stories you tell yourself about who you are and who others must be. Not to shame yourself, but to return to the truth. Not good, not innocent, just whole, just human.